It's JP Morosi with us, leading the league in a long time. Hey, JP, good morning. We interviewed Gary Sheffield yesterday on the program, as this is his final year on the writer's ballot for Hall of Fame eligibility. And you were dying to get a story in, for which we ran out of time yesterday. All kinds of canvas today. Give us your Gary Sheffield 2008.
Good morning. Gary Sheffield, we know him for the numbers, more than 500 home runs. But I also know him for the number 1, which is the number of occasions on which I have ever seen a major league player charge the mound from first base. It was Gary Sheffield back in 2008. Here was the scene. Fausto Carmona, now we know him as Roberto Hernandez, hit Sheffield with a pitch in September of 2008. Shef is on first base, and then after one throw over says, no, we're going to go. And they met halfway, and here's what happened next. Now, as remarkable as this scene was on the field as it unfolded, the post-game press conference was even better, in which Shef basically said, and I'm paraphrasing here, "I've seen the video, and I'm taking receipts as to who was hitting me in the back of my head." I'm sure that Shef, to this day, all these years later, more than 15 years later, could tell you chapter and verse of who was landing punches on the back of his head while he was in a headlock. And I remember looking around at the other reporters as we were listening to Sheffield's post-game press conference saying, are we going to be able to print all of this that he's saying about what happened on that field? It was an all-time press conference from an all-time player who deserves a check mark by his name on the Hall of Fame ballot for that night alone. So says this correspondent.
I kind of want to see the video again, because I want to see, was it not Fausto Carmona?
Fausto's
Who was hitting him in the back of the head?
It may have been Carmona. I also think longtime switch-hitting middle infielder Asdrubal Cabrera was involved in some way, shape, or form. It got pretty tense. There was also a moment there where I saw Gary Sheffield about a foot away from Victor Martinez with Miguel Cabrera trying to separate them. There's a lot of home runs in that particular conversation. Gene Lamont trying to restrain him too. There was a lot going on.
Yeah.
And I just remembered the post-game press conference being an absolute all-timer. Put the press conference itself into Cooperstown.
Love it. Let's move on to the free agent market, JP. And you have some context for us on a conversation Harold and I were having before the break, where we were talking about Jordan Montgomery. We were talking about Blake Snell. Consistency, innings, durability, success. Put it into focus for us.
It is a really interesting comparison. And when you talk about the teams that are involved in each of these players right now, Montgomery and Snell, both, of course, left-handed. Snell is from the West Coast, so perhaps a lot of the teams, and you mentioned the Angels, might be a bit more West Coast focused. For Snell, we know Montgomery living this offseason in Boston, where we know the Red Sox certainly looking for an additional left-handed pitcher to go along with Chris Sale. But look at the way that those last couple of years have gone for each of these two players. So here you go. It's not just the platform year, but it's 2022 and 2023. The innings edge belongs to Montgomery. The edge in whip belongs to Montgomery. The strikeouts per walk belongs to Montgomery. And I think that the ERA plus, Matty, you referenced, I think that number is heavily influenced by Snell's ability to strand runners. And you wonder, would he be as good in that capacity in a less pitcher-friendly environment than San Diego's Petco Park? I think that's something that a lot of teams are looking at right now. You mentioned the walk total is admittedly high. That's why Montgomery has the edge in whip on Snell, but Snell's ability to pitch around trouble, really impressive, especially as he utilizes the environment, the defensive environment too. So I would say pay very close attention there. For the West Coast, you also wonder a team like the Mariners. We know they're not necessarily spending a ton in free agency, but if they're able to bring in a pitcher like Snell, does that allow them to trade from their depth with someone like Brian Wu or Bryce Miller? Now, my favorite thing about joining these two pitchers together, the month in which they were born, the same month of the same year, December 1992. Happy birthday belatedly to Snell. Happy early birthday to Montgomery. 1 week from today, look at this rotation.
It's amazing.
All born in the month of December 1992. And how about this? Musgrove and Snell, teammates with the Padres, born the same day, the same year. Birth twins, if you will, ended up pitching together there in San Diego.
Explosive weapon.
That's right.
New explosive weapon
those,
indeed.
not those twins,
That's
Scott.
crazy. Amazing. Now, JP, though, all the comparisons, Montgomery and Snell, I get it, all that. But doesn't Snell just drop the mic with 2 Cy Youngs?
Yeah.
Are we ignoring that?
Yeah.
Well, it's important, Harold, to be able to say, listen, he's won the Cy Young in
Twice.
each league.
That's
in
Cooperstown
each league.
stuff.
Exactly. And so I think you look at, again, the ability to make pitches, where his ERA fell this past season. That is, to your point, the mic drop and the consistency of what he's been able to do. When you are that brilliant in each league to win the Cy Young, I do agree that's a pretty strong argument. And that's where, and we'll see, a team like the Giants, if they don't get Yamamoto, and we know that, of course, Snell, again, being from the West Coast, he may be predisposed to stay on the West Coast. With the Giants, if they don't get Yamamoto, I do think the Giants and Snell are a pairing that would be very logical in the coming days.
All right, makes sense. Let's get you to a team that we have not heard bandied about in the market for any of the pitchers that you just mentioned, and that's the Milwaukee Brewers. More dialogue has been generated around who's going as opposed to who's coming. What's the latest?
Well, they're a team, and I spoke with a source about this last night, Maddie. It appears that both Adames and Burns, both Willie Adames, the shortstop, and Corbin Burns, the starting pitcher, are available. They have talked with multiple teams about both players. What I was told last night is the most likely outcome is not that they're in the same deal if they're moved, but separate deals. And there's been a report, Susan Slusser of the Chronicle in San Francisco talking about how Adames is someone that the Giants have looked at. Ben Nicholson-Smith has talked about how you potentially look at Adames there in Toronto as well. With Burns, I would expect that his market, again, we talk about Yamamoto, once Yamamoto signs, maybe that next group of teams, if he does not go, let's say if Yamamoto does not go to the Dodgers, I think the Dodgers and Burns become a potential pairing. The Giants, as I mentioned as well, whether it's Adames or Burns, because they want to get an additional starting pitcher as well. These are the teams to watch carefully. The Brewers, I do not believe, I know that it's been discussed and mentioned a bit, I don't see either of these guys going to the Chicago Cubs in division with new manager Craig Counsell. I would be surprised to see that happen. But I do think in general the Brewers are looking at potential fits to trade these veterans with the financial component of things. We talked about Woodruff being available now on the free agent market a moment ago. The Brewers thought that they could get some prospects if they moved Woodruff. Obviously, the surgery made that not possible at the moment, so that is probably a greater argument for them to pursue a trade for Burns.
You know, the Brewers with really putting together 3 straight solid years, and I don't know what's going on now. I certainly hope they don't regress to what we watched, in the late 2000s, 2009, 2010, when things kind of crumbled there. They built something really nice, and I hope that they can sustain it. It's going to look a little different, and there are bats out there that could help them, including one bat that you think is being undervalued and overlooked in this year's free agent market.
Teoscar Hernandez put together a really strong second half with the Seattle Mariners. He is available now. Part of that general conversation about right-handed power bats in there with Justin Turner, Jorge Soler, JD Martinez. Some comps for Teoscar, even in an environment here where there is a lot of competition for that same position. I think a 3-year deal for him is a very fair level, especially when you consider what he did down the stretch. Check that out, a slugging percentage of .480, the on base up above 300 with power. He is a really intriguing prospect to go to a number of different places. I would look at a team like the Miami Marlins. They're trying to replace Jorge Soler. If they don't bring Soler back, I like Teoscar as being a very good fit there to go back. I look at the Boston Red Sox, depending how things go with Justin Turner. Turner, I think, has a broad amount of interest, whether it's, again, teams on the West Coast like the Giants. I could also see a really good fit, and again, Ben Nicholson-Smith has mentioned this too, about the potential of the Blue Jays for Justin Turner. So all of these possibilities, some of them shorter term than others, but I think Teoscar is still a relatively young player as free agents go. A 3-year deal is what he's looking for, and I do think there's a decent chance he gets it.